Throughout the year, I take a look at vehicles you guys really want to see featured on the channel, whether it's crossovers, sedans, or even on the rare occasion, exotic cars. But recently I got a comment on one of my videos pertaining to the Honda Civic, saying, why would I spend $30,000 to $35,000 on a mid-size sedan that's not a top trim, that maybe gives you some creature comforts, when I could just buy a Honda Civic and get everything I'm looking for below $30,000. And it got me thinking. I have featured the Honda Civic before. It was the Touring a couple of years ago, but I wanted to return for the Sport. I see this trim everywhere on the roads. I'm trying to figure out why buyers are so enamored with this car. Is it the looks, especially with the gloss black side mirror caps, or is it the pricing and the overall value? Well, that's what we're going to find out today in this review. We're going to take a good long look at the 2024 Honda Civic Sport, take a look at the exterior, the interior, the features it's offering, take it out for a test drive, and also see why, if you are looking at buying a compact sedan under $30,000 and you may be cross-shopping the competition, maybe you're thinking you want to go to a mid-size sedan, maybe it's the compact sedan segment with the Civic that's your best option. Now, before we get in this review, I'd like to thank Atamian Honda in Tewksbury, Massachusetts for allowing me to do this review. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Honda inventory. Also, before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. Buyers have always had to face the dichotomy between affordable and fun to drive, as now more than ever, the delta between what's attainable and enthusiast-focused is wider than ever. Small compact cars have proven to be enjoyable and economical throughout the decades, but now it almost seems like you have to cross the $30,000 price bracket to find anything appealing. The Honda Civic Sport for 2024 just might be a great compromise for consumers who like athletic aesthetics but are still prioritizing reliability and fuel efficiency. Starting off with pricing, the Sport comes in at $25,550 to be the mid-tier trim for the sedan variant, and likely sleekest model you'll find without the SI badge. In an automotive climate where cars have gotten larger compared to prior generations, the Civic sedan has retained its compact dimensions, playing a huge role in its ability to be nimble as you navigate condensed city streets, yet still practical enough to handle weekly tasks. A huge improvement from the 10th generation Civic is that this sedan was one of the first to utilize the new Honda architecture platform that underpins both the HR-V and CR-V, and with that has ushered in substantial changes to the rigidity of the chassis and build quality for Honda's most affordable vehicles. Some of that translates to the styling, as the 11th generation Civic appears upscale even for the Sport, yet there are cosmetic elements that help create a great first impression. Made standard are full LED headlights, which right off the bat provides a modern look to the front fascia. But also, with Honda putting far more development and thought into the SI and Type R for this generation, the Civic sedan in general benefits from the brand's dedication to this market. The matte black contrasting accents matches perfectly with the rally red paint on this model, and being a Sport, gloss black trim outlines the windows for a lower profile appearance. Then taking a look at the side profile, the Sport will be sitting on 18-inch gloss black alloy wheels, with the ability to opt for a single 5-spoke wheel design for $1,700. For 2024, this trim, along with the Touring, are the only models equipped with 18s, while the LX uses 16s and the EX with 17s. Even with the larger tires, the Civic suspension is more than forgiving, providing enough stiffness where you won't experience much body roll, but it won't feel as planted as the SI. You'll have gloss black side mirror caps, further adding to the aggressive look of the Sport. Making our way around to the back, the Civic has a clean and nicely styled rear fascia, as there's very minimal contrasting accents, but the subtle deck-lid spoiler molds perfectly with the body lines of this sedan. Typically for a sub $30,000 car, there's a lack of character, but that's not an issue for this generation, and more specifically for this model, as the sportier aesthetics creates the perception that this trim is more expensive than the price tag would suggest. Powering the Sport is a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, producing 158 horsepower and 138 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with a CVT. A bit apprehensive walking into this trim, knowing that the EX and Touring offers a more potent powertrain, doubts crept in before getting behind the wheel, as the 9.2 second 0-60 time didn't appear all that impressive. Yet where buyers of this sedan will truly enjoy this car is tooling around in the city and on back roads, as it does take some time to get up to speed under heavy accelerations. Yet with that being said, the Civic Sport doesn't suffer from a lack of power necessarily, as the 2-liter is more than capable for a wide range of applications, and shoppers shouldn't feel pressured to upgrade to the 1.5 if they're trying to stay as frugal as possible. Of course, all Civics will be front-wheel drive, but when it pertains to fuel economy, which is likely the most important metric for this sedan, you'll receive right around 30 miles per gallon in the city and 37 miles per gallon on the highway for the Sport. Stepping inside, captivating for a car under $30,000 is the driving environment, which is where Honda just might be best in class when it comes to interior design. Despite this model being equipped with manually adjustable cloth seats for both the driver and passenger, you should find yourself rather comfortable on longer drives, as these seats are surprisingly supportive. With the list of features for the Sport trim being shorter than what you'll find in the EX and Touring, you'll still have a leather-wrapped steering wheel, push-button start, and half-digital, half-analog gauge cluster that is customizable and showcases an impressive amount of information, considering what other rivals are offering at this price point. By using the dial on the left side of the steering wheel, you can scroll through different menus, including vehicle settings, fuel efficiency, and select what info you want shown. Then moving over to the infotainment system, you'll have the smaller 7-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, and you will have an 8-speaker sound system. Very simplistic and easy to use, there'll be quick access buttons mounted beneath the screen to get you to different menus, and you'll have dials for the volume and tuning found on the left and right of the head unit. If you plan to primarily use Apple CarPlay, for example, you may find the basic software to be more than enough. But if you desire an immersive experience, the 9-inch display on the Touring will satisfy your need for technology. You'll also have a multi-angle rear backup camera with trajectory to help you park the Civic. Below is home to your climate control settings, including the AC and front and rear defrosters. Heated seats and dual-zone climate control are available starting on the EX trim for added comfort and convenience. Then as we make our way towards the center console, there will be a cubby for a smartphone, and you'll also have a USB input and 12-volt outlet. The Civic Sport does have a drive mode selector where you can choose between Eco, Normal, and Sport, and you can also turn off the Auto Start-Stop feature. Finally, to round out the front portion of the interior, for the center storage compartment, there's plenty of room for a smartphone, wallet, or other smaller items. Now quickly taking a look at the second row seating area, we're going to sit off on the passenger side. And this seat has been adjusted all the way back and in fact is not on a recline at all. And I have plenty of legroom, and really it's not something you would think about with a compact sedan like this. You would probably think, oh, I'm going to feel cramped and claustrophobic, or my passengers will feel cramped and claustrophobic. But that just isn't the case with this generation. In fact, dare I say that the Honda Civic is a bit family friendly, and that's not something you would associate with a car in this segment. Now, of course, I would go a little higher up in the trim levels. That's just my take. But with the cloth seats, you get a good amount of comfort and support back here. I do think that if you have taller passengers sitting in the back, they won't have any issues at all. They have plenty of legroom, but also even headroom isn't too bad in this car. Also, when it comes to shoulder room, you don't feel too claustrophobic, but let's see if you can fit a third person in the center. Now, moving on to the center seat, you are going to have some great placements for your feet. The center hump is pretty aggressive, so just keep that in mind. It will take away from legroom and possibly shoulder room as well. I do think, though, this is one of those rare moments you could squeeze in that third person. But again, this is really probably better suited for just 4 people overall. If you're looking for something like that, you might want to go with the Honda Accord. And then taking a look at the driver's side, the seat is adjusted a bit more further up. And again, I have a lot of legroom here where I can just stretch, relax, and enjoy the driving experience. So I think whether you're going with a sport or even a touring, you're going to have a lot of interior space where everyone should be pretty comfortable. Now, no surprise, you're not going to have two rear air vents mounted on the center console, nor are you going to have any USB-C or 12-volt outlets, and that's something I would not expect to see in a car in this market. Also, we don't have two rear cup holders. Now, coming around to the back, obviously you're not going to receive a power liftgate on the Honda Civic sedan, but inside, behind the second row of seats, you're looking at right around 14.5 cubic feet of room, which is actually pretty fantastic for a car of this size and in its class. In fact, this could rival some mid-size sedans out there and also even some luxury compact sedans. So in regards to its price point, this is a great vehicle. Now, of course, if you are somebody who is constantly on the go, you might want to go with the Civic hatchback because of that better practicality. But if you have no preferences and all you want is a reliable vehicle under $30,000, the Civic sedan is providing a lot of interior space. I was able to fit on my camera gear today, no problem. So that's 2 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. And there's still enough room to go grocery shopping afterwards. Also, interestingly enough, is that this cargo area is deceptively wide, but also deep as well. So you can fit a lot of items back here if you are going on a road trip with the family. Then with the second row seats folded, you will be able to fit longer items in the back of the Civic, but interestingly enough, all the second row seats fold. So it's not a 60-40 split, it's a 100% split. So just keep all of that in mind with the sport trim. But if you don't have people in the back at all times, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Then beneath the floor mat, and this was a bit of a surprise, you are going to have a spare tire. So if you're doing a counter flat on your road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. And finally, for the moment we've all been waiting for, let's take the Honda Civic Sport out for a test drive. So we're now behind the wheel of the 2024 Honda Civic Sport. Let's take this little sedan out for a test drive to see how it performs, how it handles, how it drives, how it compares to other compact sedans in this market, but also to see if this trim is the pick. The last time I featured a Honda Civic of this generation, it was a top trim touring. And in my mind, I want the best value. I want the best features. I want the best powertrain. But I've seen a lot of sports on the road, and maybe it's time to rethink my thought process on this particular sedan. Maybe it's the Sport that's the best value in the lineup for the Civic. Now, what I will say is that when you do get behind the wheel of this car, it does feel pretty peppy, but also, even in sport trim, it feels pretty well refined. Now, having driven the HR-V before test driving the Civic today, I will say this, that this powertrain feels more spry and more agile than in the HR-V. And it's probably because the Civic is a lighter car, so it doesn't feel as sedated, doesn't feel as lethargic. This actually feels pretty quick for what it is. It's also pretty fun as well. You can throw it around. And because it is a sedan, you have that lower center of gravity, so you have more confidence in the corners than that HR-V. But within the first 2 minutes of driving this car, I'm actually thoroughly impressed. And a lot of it is because of this generation, this platform that is underpinning the Civic for this generation. And what Honda's been doing for the past few years is that they've really given their cars a lot of refinement. I hate using that term, but they've really done a great job with the interiors where they don't feel cheap. None of these cars that Honda is producing right now feels cheap, feels really unrefined, feels a bit tacky. This actually has a lot of quality to it that you really won't find in other vehicles in this market. I will say that compared to its closest rival, the Toyota Corolla, the Corolla does feel very outdated, whereas this Civic, it still feels cutting edge. It feels very modern in here, especially with the half digital, half analog gauge cluster, which I gotta say, I really love. And when it comes to the dashboard as well, it's the same layout that we see in the CR-V and HR-V. And that to me is an eye-opener with this car. Personally, I think Honda right now is giving you the best of everything in this market. And again, we got to remember, this is under $30,000. You're not going to get a full digital gauge cluster. You're not going to get the largest infotainment system. You're not going to get dual zone climate control with the Sport. You're not going to get a lot of features that you would find in a more expensive car or even a Honda Accord. But in sport form, in this trim, you're getting a car that I think at its price point is likely one of the best options that you have right now. Not only when it comes to fuel efficiency, but also I just like the way this car performs and rides on the roadways. Cars in this market, and really Civics in general, we go back to the Civics a couple generations ago, these cars did not feel so upscale in a way. They didn't have the rigidity to the chassis and the suspension. You drove a car that was all economical all the time, and you didn't get the comfort. You didn't get the on-road performances you have here with this car. I'm really thoroughly impressed and surprised with the Civic. And again, I loved the Civic Touring I had featured 2 years ago, but the Sport, to me, is one heck of a value if you're somebody not willing to spend over $30,000. Now, obviously, you're not going to get the most in-depth user interface, but really, I don't think that you need to. As long as you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, that's all you really need for a car in this market. What I also love, too, is the way the steering wheel feels nice, really aggressive 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel, but also firm 9 and 3 grips as well. So you can have a lot of fun with this car on back roads. But best of all, just when it comes to driving this car around in the city or even on the highway, it doesn't have this lack of power, this lack of inspiration. It doesn't feel like a car that you only want to drive to point A to point B. This actually has some engagement to it, which again is not something that I would associate with the Civic, especially with the CVT. And I think that is a testament to the platform and really what Honda has been doing to their vehicles. The fact that a car with 158 horsepower, a CVT, 4-cylinder engine can be this fun in this form kind of tells you what you'd expect with an SI or Type R. And that's why the Honda Civic, I do think it's better than all of its rivals, and you really don't need to go too deep into that either, just because of what this car is giving you as price point. But when you get behind the wheel, it's difficult to look elsewhere. It's difficult to look at the Toyota Corolla. It's difficult to take a look at the Volkswagen Jetta, especially at this price point. But also another thing too to keep in mind is that a lot of manufacturers are moving away from compact sedans in this market. And actually we're seeing that regardless of size. We're also seeing that in the mid-size as well, especially when you look at what the Honda Accord is going up against. There's less rivals. And with the Civic, this just embarrasses a lot of competitors. And I would say that at least in this trim, this would be better than what you see from the Hyundai Elantra. Well, I do think that Hyundai is giving you more of a tech-driven experience, not necessarily a sporty experience for their non-N-line and N trims for the Elantra. From a daily driving perspective, it's difficult for me to look elsewhere. And I'm not just looking at this car from a positive perspective, because I would say, just me being somebody who likes having all the creature comforts, that I would prefer going with the Touring. But for somebody at this price point, you're getting really far more than what you would have received a couple generations ago for a car of this size. And this really goes back to the suspension and the platform as well, that when you go over the bumps and imperfections on the roadways, you really don't feel them. In fact, this car feels very planted to the street. And again, when you do go over those imperfections, the suspension softens them. So you're kind of gliding with those bumps and some of the adversity that you'll be experiencing, especially on New England roads. But the fact that this car, even with it not having all the bells and whistles, feeling this high quality, this refined, is something that's very rare, especially right now in the 2020s, and I understand why the Honda Civic is very difficult to find. It's very rare to come across a Civic that's available and not already sold. What I also really enjoy about this car is the seating position, but also the bolstering of these seats. And even though they are cloth, they provide a lot of support, a lot of cushioning, and I feel very composed in this car. And that's not something you would get with some rivals. Some rivals don't have that aggressive bolstering. And of course, this is a sport, so you're going to have some of those qualities make its way into this trim, but still, it's not something I would anticipate or expect for a car in this price range and in its class. Now, getting into overall vision behind the wheel of the Civic, you have a nice panoramic view. A-pillars are super thin, so you won't have any blind spots when you are approaching intersections. Then taking a look at side mirrors, they are decently sized. They are a bit more aerodynamic, but I can see what's in my blind spots. And looking out back, nice, decent sized rear window. Headrests don't get in the way at all, so I can see the vehicle directly behind me perfectly. But also another thing too is that the hood, yeah, it does stick out a bit. It has this sportier design to this generation, but that's not really creating any blind spots when I look directly in front of me. But also an attribute with this generation Civic that we didn't have years ago, and this is actually becoming a quality and characteristic that we're seeing across the board for a lot of cars in this market, especially since we are seeing a revival of sporty, compact cars, is that it does have this cockpit feel to it, the way the center console is designed, the way the dashboard is molded around you, and just the way the steering wheel is. This really gives you a lot of inspiration. It really gives you some of those incentives to drive this car a bit longer, that it's not just a point A to point B vehicle. It's something a bit more and that you can have some fun with it. Obviously, if you are an enthusiast, go with the SI because you get the manual transmission, especially if you can't really go all out for a Civic Type R. But if you're somebody that is solely looking for a daily driver that is economical, that can be fun, but also comfortable as well, I think the Civic Sport is exactly that trim you should go to. And I'm not saying that it's unnecessary to go all the way out to a touring, but the fact that you're getting this much in a sport trim under $30,000, that's phenomenal. Also surprising, but I'm seeing a lot of this now with Honda vehicles, is how tight the steering is. And I've talked about this for a few years, that Honda's handling and steering has become very European-like. It's not this vague feel. You don't drive this car in the corners and you have that loose steering that is associated with Japanese vehicles or even American vehicles. This has a very firm and enjoyable steering that, again, I was not anticipating for this car. Honda has essentially made buying an economical, affordable, and fuel-efficient car fun. And the Civic has always been that, but compared to its predecessors, this generation, to me, is likely the best we've seen in quite some time, especially when you look at the price and the value for that pricing. So let's spend a little time on the highway before I head back to the dealership. Unfortunately, we are going to have a slower vehicle in front of us. Typical. He's not going to be able to have the cornering ability that I will. So I really can't test out if there's any body roll here, but love the steering. I really, truly love the steering of modern day Hondas. And at highway speeds. So safely able to get on the highway. Now I do think though that under heavier accelerations, that's where this powertrain does show that it is a bit lethargic in a way, that it is maybe starving for a bit of power. But when you are driving this car around in the city and suburbs, that's a completely different experience. I think that, especially on the low end, when you're cruising between, you know, off the line to about 30, 40 miles an hour, it really has a nice power band between that 20 to 50 miles per hour range. And that's where I think this car is at its best, which is why I think it is a great suburban and urban car. It's just when you are on the highway, you are going to feel some of that rubber band effect with the CVT, but also the fact that it is going to be a bit slower. You got that droning, but outside of that, I think this car is a great daily, but also it's a car that really just gives you a lot of confidence. It's competent too. And those are two words that you might not put together with a car of this size and in its market, but it's competent, it's compliant, there's a lot of confidence, and most importantly, there's a lot of refinement. And that is something that I can truly appreciate about the Civic Sport today. So to quickly wrap up my time with the 2024 Honda Civic Sport, what are my final thoughts and takeaways for this compact sedan? I genuinely like this car. I truly do. And if you guys know me, I prefer having leather seats. I prefer having dual zone climate control. I want all the bells and whistles. But for a car in this price point and for a car that's not a top trim, you're receiving quite a bit. I really love the dashboard design. I love the interior. And I also love the fact that it has a nice demeanor on the roadways. That alone makes this car a great value at its price point. You know, set aside the fuel efficiency, set aside the practicality and the interior space. The fact that you're spending below $30,000 and you're getting an interior that makes sense aesthetically speaking, but also just when you're using it, where you have actual dials for the climate control, dials for the volume and tuning, that alone I think is going to get a lot of people raving and really draw people in. But also you do have a half analog, half digital gauge cluster, and you also have a dashboard that looks very classy. On the road, this car has a really nice feel to it. It does feel sporty, it does feel composed, it also has some level of refinement. And again, it's not something I would associate with a car in this market and price point. And yet here I am, really genuinely surprised. And I'm actually glad I came down here to check out the Sport because, like I said before, I've seen a lot of the Sports on the roadways. It made no sense to me. I'd rather go in the touring direction or at least a little bit higher up in the trim levels. And yet, I actually think it's the Sport trim that's giving you a lot of value. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.